Being so close to my house, it would seem logical that I go to the Hoosier Valley Railroad Museum more often. But I don't. And the reason is simple. I've pretty much seen everything there is to see at the museum. Except for one thing. Steam. Hoosier Valley has a very small and incredibly adorable steam locomotive called Bach Lumber Company No. 1 that currently operates. I've never seen this thing run, although I did see it being moved dead in tow last time I was at the Hoosier Valley. Either way, this locomotive operates only on specific days throughout the year, and one of those events is the Steam Pumpkin Train, which runs in October. And with my cousins wanting to go along for a special event for Halloween, as well as them just so happening to come over on the same day that the train was running, we all decided collectively to head down to the museum to do the Steam Pumpkin Train. The tickets nearly got sold out, but we managed to snag the last few at the very last minute. We arrived at the museum around 2, which was perfect. The plan was basically a repeat of last time. Chase one train and then ride the next one. The train we'd be chasing was the 2:30 train, and the train we'd be riding would be the 4:30 train. As we made it there, I took a bunch of photos of Bach Lumber No. 1 sitting at the station. It was so nice to finally see it up close. However, we got word that the diesel train, which was out on the line at this point, had to get back before Bach Lumber No. 1 could leave. So we decided to head down to the area where the pumpkin patch was, as well as several other events, which happened to be close to the locomotive shops and the track that the diesel excursion would soon be going down. And after a semi-short wait, CKIN 818, the same engine that I saw last time I was at the Hoosier Valley, rolled around the curve and came to a stop.
I want to throw this chip so bad. Go faster. Go faster!
It was cool to see 818 again, but I had extensively documented this unit last time I was at Hoosier Valley, so today was steam and steam only. So I headed back over to the station where No. 1 was sitting to get more pictures and wait for its departure, and as I was doing that, 818 pulled out of the way and onto the main track to clear the path for No. 1. Or so I thought. Foreshadowing. After I was done filming that, I met up with one of my friends from school who I found out actually worked at the Hoosier Valley, so that was cool. And he told me that No. 1 was going the other way. They were running dual excursions on this day, and so instead of having number 1 go forwards onto the section of the line that I had chased on before, it was going the other way. A way that meant it only passed over one crossing on its entire route that I could catch it at. Great. But I figured I might as well try and get some shots of it at that crossing, right? So I positioned myself behind the depot just in time as number 1 started reversing out. Now, right before I cut to the next shot, I want you to pay attention to the weather here. Cloudy, but not immediately rainy. And that's what it was like as we were leaving to head to the other crossing. I knew it was supposed to rain today, but I had heard that it wasn't supposed to happen until later, so I figured that it would be fine. And as we approached the one crossing, it still wasn't raining. And even as the train came into view, it was only sprinkling. My camcorder is not waterproof. A large amount of water will cause it to straight up die. However, I figured that a light sprinkling would be fine, as I'd filmed in a light sprinkle before. And it was still sprinkling as the train approached the crossing and the gates activated. And then, right as it was getting close and I started to film, it started pouring. The rain came down so hard that I immediately knew I was screwed. So I hid my camcorder under my shirt, waited for the traffic to go away, and then I ran across the road to my dad's car that was parked on the other side. I climbed in and got this absolutely atrocious shot of number 1 reversing over the crossing from the front windshield. Then I thought, oh well, I can pan and get a shot out the window, only for a car to come at the worst possible time and block number 1 from view. After that fiasco, we realized, oh wait, we have an umbrella in the car. And so we decided to go and get it, and we made it outside just in time before number 1 went over the crossing again. And I got a very nice panning shot with some awesome whistle blasts in the rain. With no other crossings on this stretch of line, we had no other option but to head back through the downpouring rain to the depot, which thankfully, being a depot, has a cover. So there was actually a place I could stand to get one more shot of number 1. And better yet, since it wasn't stopping at the station, rather the pumpkin patch, that meant that it would go straight through the depot and I could get another shot of it. Which is exactly what I did. I ran out of the car and onto the platform before number 1 rolled by with its excursion through the depot. After that, I once again ran through the absolute downpour across the entire museum to the covered tent over by the pumpkin patch. Thankfully, I had my camcorder in my camcorder bag at this point, so it didn't get wet. However, I did, and the ground was so slippery that I think it's an absolute miracle that I didn't slip. Either way, once I made it there, it wasn't too long before number 1 reversed backwards back towards the depot to park the train, ready for the next excursion, with some awesome wheel slip caused by the rain. After that, I got stuck over in that tent for like 10 minutes because the downpour was so severe that I literally could not make it back. I didn't bring a rain jacket or even a coat with me because it wasn't that cold and I wasn't anticipating this. Great. After the rain finally calmed down for about 30 seconds, I made my way back over to the car. Since number 1 wouldn't be moving for another 2 hours, we made our way to an ice cream place in North Judson to eat ice cream while we waited. And as you can see by the windshield, the rain was a lot worse when we got there. We were at the ice cream place for a solid 40 minutes, eating our ice cream, playing with the chalk outside, and just waiting for the rain to get better. Spoiler alert, it didn't get better. Until I made it back to the museum. At that point, the rain had pretty much gone away, which was perfect timing as our train was about to depart. We got our tickets punched and climbed into the open coach, which they let you walk around in while the train is moving, by the way, which is really cool. We waited in our train for quite a while for 8:18 to clear, and eventually it came around the corner. Since the approach of 8:18 was so slow, I didn't feel like holding my camcorder out the side of the train for like 5 minutes to film it stop. So I took a bunch of awesome head-and-head photos of Bach Lumber Company number 1 staring directly at 8:18. If they had gotten closer, I could have gotten a proper nose-to-nose shot, but I think this super cool shot of 8:18's very bright headlight lighting up the smoke of number 1 is really cool. And I'm so glad I was on the train at this precise moment to get this shot, as early in the day it would have been so rainy that the train wouldn't have really been in the correct position. After a while, though, 8:18 reversed and then went around the other line, and I got yet another shot of it going by the pumpkin patch. With 8:18 now out of the way, Bach Lumber could depart.
Be aware that the train could speed up, slow down, or stop suddenly, so make sure you have something.
And with the 818 out of the way and all the crew collected at the train, it was time for the day's final steam pumpkin train to depart, this time with us on board. And on the way out, we passed by a couple of other locomotives that are at the museum, including AKRX 1463, which is a former Illinois Central SW14, still in its Death Star paint, of course, 818, and a former Long Island Railroad Alco RS3, which is currently undergoing restoration, as you can tell by the primer paint. Behind it is a long cut of heritage rolling stock, also owned by Hoosier Valley, including a random orange caboose, a nickel plate high-speed service caboose, number 471, an MTD reefer car, number 14070, a Norfolk and Western boxcar, number 54880, a nickel plate gondola, number 45622, a Norfolk and Western coal hopper, number 40639, an Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern transfer caboose, number 184, and a former TTGX flat car, number 479727. As the train steams farther away from the main museum area, we reach the storage sidings on the Hoosier Valley. The Railroad Museum stores cars here for short lines and Class 1 railroads as a way of making extra money during the seasons when their excursions don't run, and just to finance them in general. We see several auto racks, grain hoppers, a bunch of CSX boxcars, and even a rare Desicon Transportation Opera center beam. And now we approach the one and only crossing on this stretch of line, the one I was trying to catch this train at earlier. The reason why I had so little time to prepare after I got the umbrella out was simple. Right after this crossing, the track just ends, and the train turns around and goes back the other way. I think now's a good time to explain the history of this engine, so here goes. The locomotive was, of course, built for the Bach Lumber Company of Florida in 1908 by Baldwin. The locomotive bounced around through several private industrial owners throughout Florida and Georgia before eventually ending up in Ohio. The locomotives were retired and sold to a collector of steam locomotives in Detroit. The loco was on static display there for a few years before it somehow ended up in Maryland. We don't really know. The loco's history has been pretty poorly documented. It was in terrible condition while it was in Maryland, was eventually sold to a private owner of steam locomotives in Chicago, and after it finished its multi-year restoration in 2023, the owner signed a long-term lease agreement with the Hoosier Valley, and now it's here permanently as their main steam engine. Sadly, I couldn't film much of the return trip as the smoke from the steam locomotive was condensating into water because of how cold it was and was blasting straight into my camcorder lens and my eyes, so I couldn't stand too close to it. However, as we were making our way back to the museum, I did manage to nab a few more shots of the locomotives that are stored there currently, including Interlake Steel 11, the Destor SW14, a Purdue University crane, a Saratoga and North Creek BL2, and even the Notre Dame University Porter Diesel. And now, having cleared the station, it was only a few more moments before the train came to a halt at the pumpkin patch to let off the passengers. With the passengers now out and enjoying the pumpkin patch, number 1 was done with its excursion runs for the day, so it had to be put away in the shed. But before it could do that, it had to back up to clear the switch into the shop. And a few minutes later, the volunteers had angled the switch in the correct direction, and number 1 puffed into the shops towards the next set of switches that needed to be changed. And after that, it paused for just long enough for me to walk back in front of it before the rest of the switches were changed, and number 1 was given clearance to puff fully into the shop, and finally be done from a long day of pumpkin train excursions. With number 1 back in the sheds and one final photo of the DM&I RSDM 814, it was time to go. There was no more trains running for the rest of the day aside from a diesel excursion 30 minutes later, which we weren't going to bother with. And so that concluded our trip. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to come back next time for more videos just like this one. Catch those units while you can, especially the very, very tiny steam locomotives, and I will see you in the next video.